The Orthodox signed with the Catholics and they formed one church on paper, which shows you that the theological differences were peanuts. It didn't mean anything to the Pope. This guy was Orthodox Christian. Who cares? He's fighting the Turks.
In 1462, the Sultan Mehmed was on the warpath. The Wallachian border was lined with Vlad and his army, determined to keep the Turkish enemy out.
Mehmed's army was much bigger than Vlad's and much better equipped with cannon and a huge amount of cavalry. The first obstacle that he encountered was, of course, the river Danube, with Vlad drawn up on the northern bank, just ready to chop his army to pieces as it scrambled up the banks. They advanced slowly and drove Vlad back using their guns. They lost 250 men in this operation.
The Sultan sent two ambassadors to see Vlad, to negotiate possible settlement. Vlad asked them to remove their caps in his presence. And they said, "Lord, it is our custom never to bare our heads to any person." He said, "Very well, I will confirm you in your custom." So he had his soldiers come out and they took very small nails and they nailed these caps to the heads of these ambassadors. And then Vlad said, "When you come to visit a great ruler such as myself, you better go along with my customs. Go back and tell the Sultan what you have seen." And they did. And the Sultan was enraged and wanted vengeance.
With an army 3 times the size of Vlad's, the Sultan advanced and forced Vlad into retreat.
Vlad wheeled his forces around, started destroying everything in his path, marched across the Danube and destroyed villages on both sides of the Danube, which means he destroyed his own Romanian villages too.
Vlad burned food stores and poisoned wells to slow the invading army.
Scorched earth. Brilliant policy. Very, very cruel, but they say an army travels on his stomach. This was especially true in the 15th century. They lived off the land. Well, if you create scorched earth, there's no food around.
Vlad the Impaler raced back to the capital and with sadistic delight watched the invading army approach.
A first wave of Turkish came through, crossed the border and came into Romania. He won that battle, took all the corpses and the wounded and the prisoners and had a whole forest of sticks brought up in this big open field. And when the second wave came with the main army, they just stopped dead on their tracks. And so this forest of bleeding, agonizing bodies on sticks. And it was just a big, huge forest of dead bodies.
20,000, over 23,000 some odd. It was a deliberate attempt to frighten the Sultan. And when the Sultan saw this, he said, "What can you do against a man who does such terrible things?"
It was just so barbarous, so atrocious that even for them, they couldn't stand it. They just turned around and fled.
His brother Radu was the only man ambitious enough to cross this barricade of death and follow the Impaler Prince all the way to his mountain retreat.
Sultan sent a small contingent on ahead to pursue Vlad to Castle Dracula, Poianar.
Led, of course, somewhere from behind probably by his little brother. He had been promised by the Turks that he would be the ruling prince of Romania once they defeated his older brother.
He was trapped at this Castle Dracula. I mean, he was no longer capable of mounting any campaign against the Turks. And they besieged the place, and Vlad then escaped with the help of some gypsies, actually, through a tunnel, and had his horses shod backwards, shoes backwards, to confuse pursuit, and escaped over Figurash into Transylvania. Amazing.
Vlad the Impaler had repelled the massive Turkish army and escaped, outwitting his brother Radu, only to be captured by his other enemy, the Hungarian king. Vlad's blood-stained throne was filled by his hated brother.
When they got rid of Dracula, they put this puppet on the throne, Radu the Handsome, who was, after all, a native Wallachian, okay, but he was also a pawn of the Turks.
Almost 12 years after his capture, Vlad was released. With the Hungarian borders under threat from the advancing Turks, Vlad united with the king in the fight against the common enemy. Vlad was finally on his way home. Soon after Radu's death in 1475, Vlad the Impaler reclaimed his place as Prince of Wallachia. Still mourning the bloodbath of his past atrocities, the citizens could only see death and destruction in their future. Within 2 months of his ill-fated reign, Vlad's decapitated body was found in a murky bog, just miles from the capital. According to peasant tradition, in the final battle against his Turkish enemy, Vlad was murdered by the Sultan's hired assassin.
His head was cut off, encased in honey to keep it in good shape, and sent to the Sultan as proof that Kaziklo Voyevoda, the impaling prince, was finally dead.
Vlad's severed head was presented on a high stake for the crowd to witness that the great impaler had himself been impaled. As the bloodthirsty murderer of some 100,000 people, Vlad the Impaler would be immortalized as the infamous vampire Dracula, whose legend continues to evoke fear in the hearts of all that know of him.
We're heading out to the battlefield after the break to learn about the terrifying challenges facing medics during the Battle of the Somme.